Hello, and welcome to another episode of God's Manager for Life. I want to thank you for joining us every Wednesday to talk about this subject of how we manage the resources that God has given unto us. My basic premise is that we are managers, we are stewards, we are trustees of the resources that God gives to us. And so I'm working on a presentation called Manage Your Money or It Will Manage You. Now, we are in this Christmas season right now, but this is a perfect time to adopt that attitude. When we go into the stores and we start just picking up items and not planning for what we're going to buy, we don't have a list. And so we end up spending a lot more money. Another way that we end up spending a lot more money is that we spend cash. We buy with cash. Cash just kind of evaporates out of your hand. There's no way to account for it. So one of the things that I recommend for this season or for shopping in general is that you shop with either a credit card that you can afford to pay off at the end of the month, or you shop with a debit card that already has available funds. At least you are able to see exactly what you're spending. And if you have an allotted amount, you tend to spend a little bit more carefully when you're taking out your card versus cash rather. And so during this season or anytime in general, I recommend that we have a budget, that we shop with a list. Otherwise, your money is basically managing you instead of you managing your money. Now, many of us have been influenced by things that our attitudes toward money. In other words, sometimes we may say, well, it doesn't matter. I will catch up, in January, or catch up the next month. But let me tell you what happens oftentimes is that when you say that, you end up having another emergency in that next month. And this is the way sometimes we get caught in a cycle of debt, because we think at the moment that we are going to be able to pay off a credit card, let's say for an example. And so we charge maybe $200 that we hadn't planned to spend because we saw something that caught our eye. And then we plan to pay it off the next month. Well, then the next month, let's say a tire blows on your car. So now you've got to use available cash that you have to pay for that emergency that you have not saved up for. And that then keeps that $200 that you thought you were going to be able to take care of, that puts it in a debt cycle. And then of course with debt you incur interest. And so what started out to be a $200 expense could end up being a $400 or $500, depending upon how long it takes to pay. And I know this from experience. I remember once I wanted to go on a trip, could not afford it. But I said to myself, oh, I have a credit card that has a balance on it, a zero balance, that is. And so I decided, okay, I'll use this credit card and I'll go on this trip. I'll have a good time. I'll put all my expenses there. And do you know what happened? It took me about 5 years to pay off about $2,000, because every month something else squeezed in to take up the money that I had planned to pay off this debt. And so what I'm saying to you, and that is the way that our money manages us instead of us managing our money. And so to manage your money, you need to get ahead of it. You need to be the one that decides how you're going to spend it. You need to be the one that decides how much you are going to let the pleasure of the eye dictate what's really in your wallet. This is one of the things that we see that happened in the Garden of Eden. Eve saw that the fruit was good for eating. It was pleasant to the eyes, the Bible tells us. And so instead of her listening to God's word about what she was supposed to do, she decided to let her senses, to let her eyes, to let what was in front of her, she decided to let that dictate what she was supposed to do. And so her emotions was managing her instead of her managing her emotions. That's a very good example of what I'm talking about with money. It happens so frequently, and it can happen to the best of us. So my beloved, today I want to remind you to manage your money wisely. Otherwise, it will manage you. God bless you, and thank you for watching this episode of God's Manager for Life. Bye-bye.